At Christmas brunch, my mom handed out framed photos and said, "You don't deserve to be in this one, you're a disgrace." My brother handed me a microphone and said, "Funny, since she's headlining Coachella this year." The room gasped. The smell of cinnamon rolls and turkey bacon hung in the air as I walked into my mom's house on Christmas morning. The place looked exactly the same as it always did, large, almost too formal, with a faintly stuffy air. It was one of those houses where everything had a specific place, and anything out of line was immediately noticed. My mom had never let go of that need for perfection. I hadn't seen her or my brother Nathan in over a year, and Jake, my husband, had only been to a few family gatherings since we moved to Chicago. Every time we visited, it felt more strained than the last, but I told myself that this Christmas would be different. A simple brunch, a few hours of pretending that we were all happy again. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. "Come in, sweetheart," my mom greeted me with her usual stiff smile, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was wearing one of her holiday hostess outfits, elegant but slightly overdone for a simple family brunch. There was always an underlying tension between us, but I'd hoped we could pretend it didn't exist, just for today. Nathan, my older brother, was sitting at the table, already dressed for success in his perfect navy blue suit. I swear, he always looked like he was going to a business meeting, even when we were just gathering for a holiday. He barely acknowledged me, just a small nod as I took my seat at the table. Jake, my husband, was next to me, but he barely spoke. He never really felt comfortable around my family, and I couldn't blame him. They had never fully accepted him. In my mom's eyes, he was too unpolished for her perfect world, but I'd stuck with him because, for all his flaws, he was real. The brunch began like any other, with my mom asking about work, Nathan talking about his latest achievements, and the usual small talk. But there was something off in the air. It wasn't just the quiet, distant tension that had always been there, it felt like something bigger was brewing. Maybe I was imagining it, but I had learned not to ignore these gut feelings when it came to family. As the meal came to a close, my mom stood up from the table. She smiled at all of us, but this time, there was a hint of something colder behind it. I could tell she was about to do something that would make this entire morning unforgettable. She walked to the corner of the room, where a small table was set up with framed photos. They were the ones she had carefully chosen over the years, photos of perfect family moments, the ones that went on the walls and never left. She started handing them out, one by one. "Here's the picture from last year's Thanksgiving," she said, placing it in front of Nathan. "Perfect memories, perfect moments," she added with a proud smile, as if she were presenting some great accomplishment. She moved around the table, handing out photos to everyone. Finally, she reached me. The photo was from my wedding day. Jake and I were standing in front of a large group of guests, my mom looking on proudly, and Nathan was smiling as usual, playing the role of the perfect son. I'd almost forgotten about this picture. It had been taken at the height of everything, before all the drama with my mom started. The year I chose to leave the family behind, in a way, to pursue my own dreams. The year I left behind the career I'd spent years building to follow something that felt real. She handed me the frame with an almost forced grace, her eyes cold as she spoke. "You don't deserve to be in this one," she said flatly. "You're a disgrace." I didn't know how to respond. The words hit me hard, harder than I thought they would. I had grown used to my mother's criticisms, but this was different. This wasn't just about me choosing a different path, it was about her seeing me as a failure, someone who had let the family down. I could feel her disappointment, but it wasn't just her disappointment that stung. It was the way she made me feel small, as if I didn't even belong there, in the family photo, in her world. For a moment, the room was still. The clink of silverware had stopped, and the usual chatter that filled these gatherings had quieted. Everyone was watching. I could feel Jake's hand on my knee, the way he squeezed it slightly as if to comfort me, but I didn't know how to react. What was there to say? I swallowed hard, trying to maintain some composure. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let anyone see me break. I looked up at Nathan, hoping for some kind of support, but all he did was look away, his lips pressed tightly together. I was on my own at this moment. "I think that's enough," Nathan said finally, his voice low but firm. I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or to my mom, but it didn't matter. It was too late. The damage had already been done. But then, Nathan did something that completely took me by surprise. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a microphone, a small, wireless one. I had no idea where it had come from, but when he handed it to me, I knew something was coming. "Take this," he said quietly, his tone oddly calm for the moment. "You deserve to be heard." The tension in the room skyrocketed. I glanced down at the microphone in my hand, my heart racing. I hadn't expected this. But something about it, the weight of it in my palm, gave me a strange sense of power. The feeling was fleeting but enough to steady my nerves. The room had gone completely silent. All eyes were on me. I looked back at my mom, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed her approval. I didn't care if she judged me anymore. I wasn't that scared little girl anymore, desperate for her love. "Funny, isn't it?" I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. "Since I'm headlining Coachella this year." There was a beat of silence, and then, a collective gasp. The words hung in the air. My mother's face, usually so composed, faltered. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw doubt in them. She hadn't expected that. She had always assumed that I would fail, that I would come crawling back to her, begging for forgiveness. But I had found something else, something that was mine, something that made me feel alive. Nathan's mouth dropped open, his eyes flashing with disbelief. Jake looked at me with an unreadable expression, but there was a slight glimmer of pride in his eyes. My mom didn't speak. She just stood there, her face pale, as if she couldn't process what I had said. "Do you really think I ruined my life?" I continued, the words coming easier now. "Do you think that I'm a disgrace because I wanted to find my own happiness?" My voice was growing stronger, bolder. The room was still frozen in shock. "I didn't leave you because I hated you. I left because I couldn't live my life for you anymore," I said, my eyes never leaving my mom's face. "I'm sorry if that disappoints you, but I'm not sorry for who I've become." I stood up, feeling the weight of the microphone in my hand. I wasn't sure if I was finished, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. And with that, I walked out. I could feel their eyes on me as I turned to leave. My heart was pounding, and my hands were still shaking, but there was a sense of calm settling over me. I didn't know where it was coming from, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control. As I walked toward the door, I heard Jake's voice behind me. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, but I didn't answer. I just kept walking, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. I reached the door, my hand on the handle. My mother's voice suddenly broke the silence, sharp and cold. "You'll regret this," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "One day, you'll come crawling back, and I won't be here to save you." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The words stung, but they didn't have the same power they once did. For too many years, I had let her control me with her disapproval, her scorn. But today, I had taken back my life. I didn't need her permission to be happy anymore. The door slammed behind me, and I was outside. The cold air hit my face, but it felt like a release. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened inside that house. But also, there was something else, a feeling of freedom. Jake came outside a few moments later, stepping quietly beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just walked along the sidewalk, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. He knew better than to try and talk me down from my feelings right away. Sometimes silence was more comforting than words. After a few minutes, he spoke, his voice quiet but gentle. "You don't need to prove anything to them," he said, glancing over at me. "You've built something amazing, and he trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. I nodded slowly, feeling a lump in my throat. "I know. It just hurts, you know? I thought maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. But I guess I was fooling myself." Jake stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression serious. "You've spent your whole life trying to please her. You can't keep doing that, Maya. No matter what you do, it'll never be enough for her. You deserve more than this, more than her constant criticism." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But hearing her words echo in my head, "You'll regret this," made it harder to shake off the feeling that maybe she was right. What if, after all this time, she was the one who had been right all along? What if I had ruined my life by chasing a dream she never understood? But then, I remembered Coachella. The anticipation of standing on that stage, with thousands of people cheering, the music vibrating through my veins, and the sense that I was finally living the life I was meant to live. I remembered all the nights I spent in dark clubs, playing my music and slowly building a following. I had worked so hard to get here. It wasn't just about the fame or the recognition, it was about proving to myself that I could do it. That I wasn't defined by my mother's expectations or my past mistakes. I know, I said quietly, looking at Jake. It's just hard to let go, you know? It's like every time I think I've broken free, something drags me back in. Jake reached out and took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to carry their weight anymore, Maya. You've carried it for so long, and it's not yours to carry anymore. I squeezed his hand back, feeling the truth in his words. It was time to move on. But there was still a part of me, deep down, that couldn't shake the thought that somehow, I still needed my mother's approval. As we walked back to the car, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder toward the house. The curtains were drawn, the windows dark. My mother was still inside, probably fuming with anger, but I knew it didn't matter. It was no longer my job to fix her or to make her happy. That had never been my responsibility. The days that followed were strange. I hadn't expected to feel this disconnected from my family, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The years of trying to live up to expectations had drained me. And now, when I looked back, I realized that I didn't know who I was without that constant pressure. I threw myself into preparing for my performance at Coachella. I practiced every day, honing my craft, and taking every opportunity to make this the breakthrough moment I had dreamed of. But even as I focused on the future, my mind kept drifting back to that Christmas brunch. My mom's words echoed in my head, haunting me. You're a disgrace. What did that even mean anymore? Was I really a disgrace for choosing my own path? For doing something she couldn't understand? For chasing a dream that was so far from the perfect, traditional life she had always wanted for me? I wasn't sure. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, strumming my guitar, I got a call from Nathan. I hadn't spoken to him since Christmas, and I didn't know what to expect. He was always the more neutral one in the family, never as harsh as Mom, but never truly supportive either. Hey, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Maya, Nathan said, his tone softer than I expected. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk to him. Part of me resented him for not standing up to Mom more that day, but another part of me wanted some kind of connection. I'm okay, I replied, though the words felt hollow. Just, busy with work. You know how it is. There was a pause on the other end. Look, I know things are complicated right now. And I know Mom can be a lot. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Maya. I may not always show it, but I am. I always have been. I didn't know how to respond to that. Nathan wasn't the type to express his feelings often, so hearing him say that caught me off guard. Thanks, I said quietly, feeling the weight of the words settle in. It means more than you think. We talked for a while longer, about everything and nothing at the same time. At that moment, it felt like a tiny bridge had been built between us, a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As the days passed and the date of my performance at Coachella drew closer, I found myself facing the same question again and again: what did I really want? What was I truly seeking from my family? Was it their approval? Their acceptance? Or was it something else, something deeper, something I had been chasing all along without even realizing it? I didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was certain: I was finally ready to face the truth, no matter what it looked like. The days that followed were a blur of rehearsals, meetings with my manager, and media appearances. It was a strange sort of calm, mixed with the nervous excitement that came with knowing my dreams were finally within reach. Coachella was a huge deal, a moment I had worked for years to achieve, and yet, in the quiet moments, my mind kept drifting back to that Christmas brunch. To my mother's cutting words. To the silence that had filled the room after I spoke. I hadn't heard from my mom since that day. Not a call, not a text. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. I knew what she was like. She'd probably been stewing in anger, working herself up about what had happened. Part of me wondered if she'd ever acknowledge what I'd said. Part of me didn't care. But another part of me, the part one didn't like to admit existed, still wanted her approval. I didn't need it in the way I used to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that, if only she could understand, if only she could see what I had built, maybe she'd feel differently. Maybe she'd be proud of me. But what if she never would? What if, no matter what I did, I was always the disappointment in her eyes? I thought about this a lot as I sat backstage, waiting for my turn to perform at Coachella. The rush of adrenaline was starting to build in my chest, the hum of the crowd growing louder as the opening acts finished up. It was my turn soon, and I had worked my entire life for this moment. I was about to stand on a stage in front of thousands of people, a microphone in my hand, and finally do what I loved for a living. It was surreal, and yet, the only thing that kept circling my mind was the question, will my mom ever be proud of me? I glanced at the clock on the wall, and my stomach did a flip. I had only a few minutes before I was due to go on. Jake, who had flown in to be with me for the performance, was already on the side of the stage. His face was a mixture of excitement and calm, and I could see the way his eyes flickered toward me with quiet support. He had always believed in me, even when my family hadn't. Even when I hadn't fully believed in myself. You ready? Jake asked, his voice low but full of that reassuring steadiness I had come to rely on. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. I was ready, yes, but there was still something inside me that felt unsettled. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted softly, more to myself than to him. You've been doing it all along, he replied, his voice soft but firm. This is just another step in your journey. Your music. Your path. You've earned this. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I know. I just wish it were different, you know? He squeezed my hand. You're doing it, Maya. And that's what matters. I nodded again, trying to let go of the doubt swirling in my head. I was about to perform in front of one of the biggest audiences I'd ever faced, and I couldn't afford to carry the weight of my mother's disapproval with me onto that stage. Not tonight. Thanks, I whispered, my voice shaky, but grateful. The time had come. Jake gave me one last smile before he walked off to the side of the stage. I was alone now, facing the roar of the crowd, the stage lights blinding me as they focused on me. The music began to play, the beat pulsing through the floor beneath my feet. I stepped forward, the microphone in my hand, and I felt the rush of energy flow through me. The crowd cheered, and I took in the moment. The sound of thousands of people shouting my name. The feeling of being seen, truly seen, in a way that was so different from the way my family had ever looked at me. This was my moment. I made it. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the music wash over me, the lyrics flowing from my lips without hesitation. This was what I was meant to do. It was what I had always been meant to do. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't stop thinking about my mom. The song finished, and the crowd roared, their cheers deafening. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in, before I raised the mic to my lips again. This one's for anyone who's ever felt like they weren't enough, I said, my voice steady now. You're more than enough. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. The cheers grew louder, and I felt a surge of emotion swell up in my chest. This was what mattered. This was the kind of love I had been seeking all along, the love of the people who truly saw me, who understood my passion and my drive. For the rest of my set, I gave everything I had. Each note, each word, was a release, a chance to let go of everything that had weighed me down. The crowd's energy pushed me to new heights, and by the time I stepped off the stage, I felt like I was flying. Backstage, Jake was waiting for me, a proud smile on his face. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment, I just let myself lean into him, exhausted but elated. You did it, he said, his voice full of admiration. I knew you would. I couldn't help but smile, even though the doubt was still there, lingering in the back of my mind. Would my mom have been proud? We stayed at Coachella for the rest of the weekend, enjoying the festival, but the tension inside me never really went away. I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine with my family. The conversation that had started at Christmas brunch wasn't something I could just forget. After the show, I sat in my hotel room, alone for the first time in days. I pulled my phone out, scrolling through the messages and notifications that had piled up. There were messages from fans, friends, even some industry people congratulating me on the performance. But there was one text that stood out. It was from Nathan. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. No matter what mom says, I see you. You've worked hard for this, and you deserve it. I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a mix of emotions. Nathan had never been the emotional one. He had never really acknowledged how much I had struggled to get here. But today, he had said the words I had needed to hear. I typed a quick reply. Thanks. It means a lot. Hope we can talk soon. I set my phone down, letting out a deep breath. Maybe things weren't as broken as I had thought. Maybe I wasn't entirely alone in this journey. But as I sat there, my thoughts turned back to my mom. Would she ever change? Would she ever see me for who I was, instead of who she thought I should be? And then, before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my phone again and dialed her number. The phone rang, each second dragging on longer than the last. My heart was thumping in my chest, a mixture of anticipation and dread. I wasn't sure what I expected when she picked up: anger, silence, maybe even indifference. But what if she just didn't care at all? What if this was all for nothing? Finally, the phone clicked, and her voice, sharp and cool, came through the line. Maya. The way she said my name, it was as if she was remembering a version of me that no longer existed, a version of me she thought she could mold into her image. It stung, but I didn't flinch. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the way my hands were trembling. I just wanted to check in. It's been a while. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, as if she was weighing whether or not to continue the conversation. I wasn't sure if she was even processing what I was saying. I'm sure you've been busy, she finally said, her tone clipped. I saw your performance at Coachella. Of course, it was all over the news. I felt a flash of something: pride? Triumph? I couldn't tell. I'm glad you saw it. It was a big moment for me. I've been working towards this for a long time. She didn't respond right away, and when she did, it was with a sharpness that told me she wasn't happy about what I had accomplished. I never said you couldn't achieve things, Maya. I just don't understand why you had to do it the way you did. Leaving everything behind, leaving us, it was exactly what I had expected: her need to control the narrative, to make me feel like I was abandoning something sacred. But I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me again. I didn't leave you, Mom, I said, keeping my voice calm, but there was a fire burning inside me now. I left because I needed to find my own path. You never understood that. You never understood me. I've spent my entire life trying to live up to your expectations, and it was never enough. It's never been enough. There was silence on the other end, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I'm not a disgrace, I said, the words coming out with a strength I hadn't even known I had. I'm not someone to be ashamed of. I've worked harder than anyone knows to get where I am. And I'm proud of who I've become. I'm proud of my music. I'm proud of myself. It was almost as if the words were a release, a weight that had been sitting on my chest for so long finally being lifted. My voice didn't waver, even though I knew she was probably seething on the other side of the line. You've spent so many years telling me what I should do, what I should be, and I've finally realized that I don't need your approval to be happy, I continued, my heart pounding but my resolve stronger than ever. I built my own life, Mom. And I've done it without your permission. You may never accept that, but that's the truth. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, she spoke. You'll regret this one day, she said, her words empty but somehow still cutting. You've chosen a life of chaos. I gave you everything, Maya. And you threw it away. Her words didn't sting like they used to. They didn't have the power to break me anymore. I wasn't the scared little girl who had been trying to earn her approval. I had grown beyond her reach. Maybe I will, I replied, my voice cool and detached. But I'll be doing it on my terms. I hung up the phone before she could respond, my hands trembling but my heart was lighter than it had been in years. The silence in the room that followed felt strange, almost like I had just crossed a line that I couldn't go back from. I had let go of the last remnants of my hope for reconciliation, and in doing so, I realized something: I didn't need it anymore. The phone call didn't feel like closure, not in the way I'd imagined it. There were no grand apologies, no tearful confessions. It was simply the end of an era. The end of trying to please someone who would never be pleased. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't see my family after that, not for a long time. Coachella came and went, and the media buzzed with coverage of my performance. But amidst the praise and the excitement, something had shifted in me. The applause was nice, but it wasn't what I needed. What I needed was to finally stop caring about whether my mother was proud of me or not. Nathan sent me a message a few weeks later. It was brief, and for once, it felt genuine. Mom is still upset, but I think she's starting to understand. Maybe it's time for all of us to move on. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell him how hard it had been, how long I had fought to find my own identity apart from the family's expectations. But another part of me realized that it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the same person I had been a year ago. I had fought for my own happiness, and I had won. Months passed. I continued to tour, writing new music and growing my fanbase. Every step I took felt like a victory. But there were still moments when I would think of my mom, of the harsh words she had thrown at me, and a small part of me wondered if she ever felt regret. Then, one evening, after a show in New York, I received a package at my hotel. It was from my mother. Inside, there was a small framed photo, the very same one from my wedding day that she had once told me I didn't deserve to be in. There was a note attached: "I've had time to think. I may not agree with everything you've done, but I see now that you've made your own path. I've always been proud of you, even if I didn't know how to say it. I wish you all the best." I stared at the letter for a long time, the words slowly sinking in. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't everything I'd wanted to hear. But it was something I had never thought I would get. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way I had imagined. Instead, I felt free. I had spent so much time wanting to prove something to her, to win her approval. But now, I realized that the only person's approval I needed was my own. I placed the photo on the table beside me and smiled. It wasn't the victory I had expected, but it was enough. And with that, I moved forward, finally at peace with the woman I had become.